All right, there you go.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. It's good to be with everyone. Last year about this time, I was pretty sick. I gave our first webinar on charitable remainder trust, and I felt like I had golf balls in my throat. And that Friday, Good Friday, I drove home, slept the whole weekend, and Monday, April 18th was a very eventful day. I woke up from my nap, coughing so hard I hit my head on the windowsill and passed out and broke my nose. And so today I'm really excited. I'm healthy and running, back to running, swimming, and lifting weights, and so I'm really glad to be here tonight. So glad to be with everybody. By way of background, I have some inherent biases here as we talk through this subject. And the reason for that is over my 30-year career in the financial services industry, I have seen quite a few horror stories, and my heart's desire tonight is that you and your decision-making will not turn into a horror story. Okay, so I'm going to give you some principles to guide you in your decision-making that hopefully will prevent that horror story. Okay, and also by way of background, I didn't start my career as a financial services professional. I went to Eastern Michigan University, ran track cross country, was going to be a U.S. History teacher, a United States government teacher, and hopefully one day a track or cross country coach. But that didn't happen. And then it morphed into a desire to be a missionary to college students, and much like Campus Crusade for Christ. And that door closed. And then after working for our state senator who ran for Congress in 1986, I ended up working for the Pan American Games in Indianapolis in 87. And right after that, joined as an investment broker. And then a year later, Northwestern Mutual for 8 years. So I do have some inherent biases towards life insurance. And there is a purpose for it. And I'm going to go in and explain that to you. So I think without further ado, let's look at what we're trying to accomplish this evening. Number one, I want to give you some principles to create a source of funds for your child and how to do that. Some very practical things to implement so that you can make good, sound, intelligent, informed, spiritual decisions, okay? And the importance of having a will or a special needs trust or what we call an ABLE fund or an ABLE Now fund for your child. Okay, so we'll explain that as we move through the slides. So first slide, it didn't go forward. Oh, it did? I did. Oops.
You're okay.
There we go. Okay. Types of life insurance. There are basically 5 different types. Now, definitions are very important. So humorously, I am a follower of the cartoon strip called Wizard of Id. And the characters in that cartoon strip are the king, the king's assistant, and Rodney. And Rodney's usually the fall guy. So this particular day, the king's assistant comes to the king and says, Rodney's outside the palace gate with a wagon load of underwear. And the king mutters to himself, oh, all I did was tell Rodney to debrief the troops. Okay. Definitions are very important in life. And so I'm going to give you some definitions of life insurance. And hopefully you can write those down and take notes through the A, B, C, D, and E. Okay. So the first one, the first type of life insurance is what we would call in the industry term insurance. It starts with the age that you purchase it at, whether 20, 25, 30, 35, and it goes predominantly to age 70. And it increases in cost because of the mortality risk of dying during that period of time. The cost of that insurance keeps increasing to age 70. And you are basically renting that insurance, but you have transferred the risk to the insurance company. That is term insurance. So number A is term insurance. Now I want you to put a little Note here in parentheses, this is not a good choice for what you want to accomplish for your child or your loved one, okay? Because mortality experience is telling us that people are living way longer than age 70, 80s, and in their 90s. I have clients in their 90s. So this would not be a suitable type of contract for what we want to accomplish for your child. Okay, B is what I would classify as investment grade whole life insurance paid up at age 65. This is a traditional contract, but it's investment grade. What do we mean by that? We mean there's a corollary to that. It's like I went out in the marketplace and I bought a AAA rated corporate bond from a very well-known company like ExxonMobil that historically has paid a tremendous dividend consistently year in, year out. It's the same on this when we think about life insurance under B, investment grade whole life paid up, guaranteed to be paid up at age 65, but it covers you to age 100 or beyond, okay? So that's B. Now C is a little bit harder to understand. It is a hybrid of the term and the whole life insurance. We call that in the industry, and you'll look at it on a contract, it's called universal life insurance. The key word there is universal. What are we trying to accomplish here? Well, we're trying to lower the cost of whole life, but we're going to have term insurance in the contract with some cash value to offset the cost of the insurance as the insured gets older in the years 70 and beyond. Okay. Now, this type of a contract was very, very popular and is still very popular for one reason. It shifts the insurability, the risk of the insurability back to the consumer from the insurance carrier. Normally we want the insurance carrier to assume all the risk. And I'm going to illustrate this. Many of you will remember back in the Jimmy Carter years when we had tremendously high interest rates of 17 and 18%. And then when President Reagan became president, then interest rates started to decline. And as of a couple of years ago, and then not too long ago, it was at 0 or negative interest rates. And a gentleman by the name of Bill Gross was from PIMCO funds, was the guru of he was the bond king because he was just a tremendous investor and portfolio manager for PIMCO funds and their bond funds. And really anybody could have been fantastic during those years because as interest rates go down, then bond prices appreciate in value because people they're holding a bond that is paying, 15, 16, 17, 18%. And the new bonds being issued are paying less interest. So these other bonds are worth more. Okay, that's the simplest way of explaining it. So this insurance contract, a universal whole life insurance contract, it is based on the prevailing interest rate of the insurance carrier. And many of these contracts were illustrated at 12 and 14%. Well, then guess what happened when interest rates dropped? The contract couldn't sustain itself because the individuals, the insured, is in their 70s. They come into my office. They don't know what to do. They either have to kick in more money to keep the insurance contract in force, or they have to reduce the death benefit, which blows up the plan because the death benefit was there to cover one of the spouses and to help fund their retirement or to give money to their heirs, or the whole contract just blows up because the insurance carrier has cut the interest rate to 2 and 3%. So who assumed the risk there? The insurance company didn't assume the risk. The consumer did. Thankfully, when I got started in the industry, I had a healthy sense of discernment of what to use and what not to use. And I was providentially protected from ever recommending this type of a contract to a family. When I think back over my career, I probably have had to solve at least 50 of these type of horror stories. And unfortunately, there's not much you can do because the person is really at an age where it's prohibitive. I mean, you can't go out and replace the contract. You can't buy another. So they have to reduce the death benefit or they have to kick in more money. And it's really a windfall for the insurance carrier because they're not going to pay out the full face value of that insurance contract. And so the insurance carrier gets off the hook. And thankfully, I never recommended one of those contracts to any of the families that I work with. So I want you to make sure that you put a parentheses here on number C. This hybrid contract is definitely one that you want to run as fast as you can away from something like this, because this is definitely not what you want to set up for a child, to benefit a child. And because you want that insurance to be there if you live out into your 70s, 80s, or your 90s, okay? All right, D. D is another hybrid type of contract, and it's called variable universal life insurance or variable whole life. And the key word there is variable. The investment component, the cash value component of this contract is tied to the stock market. And again, you know, our whole purpose here is to deliver peace of mind. And if we're purchasing a contract that is going to have more risk to it, and it's going to be based on the market volatilities and the gyrations of the market, I think wisdom would say we don't want that. Okay. Peter Lynch once said, he was the Fidelity Magellan portfolio manager. He said the markets are driven by the seismic swings of fear and greed. And I really think that what you have here sometimes is a greed component when we're thinking, well, if I could get a 12% or a 10% return, that would really be good for my child. Well, that may not be the case. What we really want here is peace of mind and the stability of an insurance carrier, so that when that death occurs of that parent, then the beneficiary will receive the benefit, which was the original insured intent that we had in purchasing the insurance in the first place. So I want you to put another parentheses around D. D is not a contract that you would want to purchase. And then our last one is something relatively new. And thankfully these insurance companies have seen the light, so to speak, and they've come out with a level premium term product to age 100. And it's much cheaper than whole life. It doesn't build up any cash value. You're buying just pure insurance at whatever age you start it at, and it goes all the way to age 100. So our two choices for selecting for the need of our child or your child is B, investment grade whole life paid up at age 65, and E, level premium term insurance to 100. I ought to ask for questions right now because I'm sure there's some people that really got a lot of questions. So write down your questions and I'll be sure to try to answer them for you. Okay, so our takeaway here is sometimes, not always, the motivation of some of these insurance carriers is greed. Okay, they want to make a sale, but really don't solve the problem. And the other aspect is we really don't want to succumb to fear. Okay. Fear is not a good thing. Anxiety is not a good thing. Destroyer of homes and family is a not good thing. So what we want to offer to our families and to our beneficiary, which is our child, is peace of mind. Okay. All right. Next slide. Types of insurance companies. All right, there are two types. First one is a stock company. And I will say, historically speaking, many of the insurance carriers out there today have historically been mutual companies, and then they demutualized and they became stock companies. What does a stock company do? Well, they issue stock to their shareholders, and shareholders invest money in that insurance company, and they expect a return and appreciation of the price of that stock. So many times the decision-making of the board of directors is on a quarterly basis to boost that share price. They are not necessarily always making a decision in the best interest of their insured policyholders. Second type of company is a mutual company. Some examples of mutual companies are Northwestern Mutual, Mass Mutual, State Farm, Guardian, Minnesota Mutual. There are very few of these companies left in the country, but there are a few, and I've already named those for you. Inherently, they are a better suited type of company to issue insurance to you. And again, my bias is showing because I spent 8 years with Northwestern Mutual. And for this particular reason, and this reason only, they make their decisions based on the policyholder, because the policyholder is an owner of the company. And their dividend that they pay at the end of the year is based on three things. First one is their mortality experience. Generally speaking, and I'm using averages here, their mortality experience is better because they have tighter underwriting, and their mortality experience is better, so they produce a better dividend because of that. They have less death claims. Number two, their persistency is better. The policies stay on the books on average 27 to 30 years. So when you have a policyholder that's paying in premiums for 27 and 30 years to an insurance company, the persistency of that contract, the cost of that, the internal cost of that contract goes down proportionally over that many years. And then thirdly, they have a better investment experience because they have more policies that have stayed on the books, they haven't been replaced, and they don't have a high turnover. And that produces a really wonderful dividend. And then that dividend is passed on in the form of paid up additions and cash value in the whole life contract. And that whole life contract, again, is investment grade, paid up at age 65, and the internal rate of return on that contract, whether it was Guardian, State Farm, Mass Mutual, or Northwestern Mutual. Now, this is only for the 65 life that's paid up at 65, is approaching either at or above 10%. And it operates much like a zero coupon bond. A zero coupon bond starts out at a deep discounts and matures at the end of 30 years. Well, the corollary to that is that life insurance with one of these carriers, like a mutual company like Northwestern Mutual, Mass Mutual, Guardian, or State Farm, that contract will mature over 30 years with an internal rate of return of 10% or more. And you can access that cash tax-free for retirement or for the benefit of your child. So if you can afford it, this is an ideal solution. Now, if you can't, then I would recommend a not a whole life, but a level term policy to age 100, which was number E on the previous slide. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Ratings of insurance companies. All right, here we don't want any surprises. Okay, we've been through the mortgage crisis and the banking crisis of 08 and 09. We just had banks fail. As a side note, my son called me the weekend that occurred, and he said, "Dad, I've been on the phone with the CEO, and we got to find money. We can't make payroll. This thing is going to collapse, and we got $50 million." And he works for a startup out of California, and he works out of his home in Carmel, Indiana. And I don't know what to do, Dad. I mean, I don't want to let go of employees. I mean, what am I going to do? Well, by Sunday night, there was a solution, and the federal government stepped in, and FDIC insurance was increased, and basically it was a bailout, and we'll all pay part of that, But so what does that have to do with life insurance companies? Well, you don't want an insurance company to fail. So you make a decision this year, you're making a decision and you're projecting that decision out 20, 30, maybe even 40 years. You don't know when death is going to occur. I mean, I could die on the way home tonight. I mean, I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. But the point is, we want to make good, sound decisions, and we want to choose insurance companies that have the highest possible ratings as possible. So the first one you're going to look at is what we call AM Best, okay? And many insurance companies have an AM Best rating. It's usually A and B, AM Best plus plus. Then the next one, Standard & Poor's, it'll be AA or AAA. Then you have Fitch, which would be AAA or AA. And then you have Moody's, which would be AA or single A or AAA. And then the last one is Weiss. Now, why is Weiss so important? Well, because all the insurance companies pay a fee to get a rating. But Weiss does their objective analysis. So if you really want to find the soundest insurance carrier, you want to look for a Weiss rating because there's no conflict of interest. No insurance carrier is going to pay a fee to get a Weiss rating. It's totally objective. And that's crucial. We want, in this case, we want an insurance carrier that has the highest possible ratings possible, because we don't want a blow up or a default when we need to pay out a death benefit 20, 30, 40 years later. So again, A is Standard & Poor's, B's is S&P 500, or not 500, but S&P Standard & Poor's. First one is AM Best. I'm sorry, let me start all over. A is AM Best, okay? And then B is Standard & Poor, C is Moody's, then D is Duff & Phelps, E is Fitch, and then the last one is Weiss. So that's where we stand on the ratings. Now, how do we determine the dollar amount needed? Well, this gets really tricky, and my key word here is it depends, okay? Because everyone's situation is different. No one family is the same across the board, and this is very personal in your decisions. A lot of it depends if your child is going to be qualified for Medicaid or Social Security, disability. How much do you need? How much are you going to assist your child? I had a wonderful manager at the Pan American Games, Ruth Simeon. She's an African-American lady, and my job there was primarily to work with volunteers, and we did Pan Am neighbor nights. We dressed up in the clothing of the native countries from Portugal, and we had a steel kettle drum band in. We had food tasting demonstrations. And the next day, Ruth called me into her office, and she said, "Well, what did you think about working with the volunteers?" And I said, "Well, I really enjoyed it because I got to help them." And she said, "Rick, I want you to remember something. Don't ever use the word help again. That's a Medicaid word. We want to use the word assist. We want to come alongside of people and assist them and empower them, and so that they can accomplish great things." And that's exactly what you're going to do with your child. You're going to come alongside them and assist them so they can create and do wonderful, wonderful things. And so you have to determine how much money is needed to do that. Are you going to assist them in going to college? Their medical needs, their day-to-day living expenses. And you have to put a dollar amount to that, and you have to project out in the future. Excuse me. If inflation's running 8% now, but historically it's been 3%, well, then you got to put a number to that. And you know, any financial advisor has software to project out, 20 years, 25 years, what those expenses would be for college or for living expenses. So it all depends on your unique situation. And I must say that if you're going to, start an ABLE account, the contributions yearly now are around $17,000 a year. So you could create a bucket of money with a death benefit to fund an ABLE account that then is used to take care of the day-to-day expenses of that child, okay? And that's good up to age 26. Then they have what they call ABLE Now accounts for someone older than 26 for the day-to-day expenses. And I realize that this seminar tonight is really not diving into the ABLE accounts and how to qualify it for SSI and Medicaid and all these other things. But you can see that this can get very convoluted real quick and very complex. And so our decision making right now tonight is how do we create a bucket of funds that could be used for either a special needs trust or a trust or an ABLE account or an ABLE Now account. But maybe in the future we can dive into that even further, okay? So, but I'm just scratching the surface on it. All right, next slide. Which life insurance type or strategy is best? Well, I've already alluded to it. I'm already predisposed to Part B, the investment grade whole life paid up at age 65. If you can afford it, that offers you a lot of flexibility, tax-free income, as I already mentioned, and there's just a lot of things that we could do with that. But if you can't, then the fallback is a very good contract from a reputable insurance carrier with high ratings. And that would be your level term insurance to age 100. So now, as a side note, make sure whoever you're talking with that is recommending life insurance to you is using the most recent mortality table. Now, why do I mention that? Because insurance carriers are going to price that insurance contract dollar-wise per thousand based on a mortality table. And some of these carriers don't change it. You want to use the most recent because it, actuarially speaking, is the most efficient mortality table because it's the most recent, and it has categorized what the mortality experience, the law of large numbers of people living longer. And as people live longer, the mortality rate cost of insurance goes down. So just as a side note, make sure they're using the most recent mortality table, and it would be 2020, not 2019, not 2010, not 2000. We're going to use 2020. Okay. So, all right. Next slide. Which is best for your child, a will or a special needs trust? Well, obviously, if you're a young family, the least expensive way to get started to cover all your bases most efficiently is a will. A will will cost you $250, $300. You'll be able to name a guardian, an executor. You'll be able to name a power of attorney for finances and healthcare for your child. That's pure basic. You have to have that. Well, why? Why can't I just go without a will? Well, the state of Michigan is just like the state of Indiana. You die without a will, somebody else is going to make a decision on who cares for your child. You don't want that. If a judge makes that decision, that judge may not name another family to care for your child that has the same values and principles that you've governed your life by. So you want a will yesterday, okay? And I'm not an attorney, but you know, any good attorney can draw up a will, and they shouldn't cost you more than $250, $300, maybe even less. But you need some components in there. You need an executor, somebody that's going to execute the will. You need a guardian. What's a guardian? Well, that's the person that's going to care for your child. They're going to get a lump sum of money, and that guardian is going to be responsible for the care of your child. More than likely, that guardian that you name is the one that child is going to live in their home. And then that guardian also is going to have power of attorney for healthcare and finances for that child. Now, let me digress for a moment and use a personal illustration of my son and what my wife and I did for our son. We waited 10 years for Brian, and he's our miracle baby. Okay, so he's born October 10th, 1985. He's 37. All right. But at the time, we needed a will. So we named a guardian to take care of Brian in case something happened to us. I had all the life insurance. The life insurance would avoid probate. The named beneficiary was the guardian. The money would go to the guardian to take care of Brian. We stipulated in the will that when Brian graduated from high school, he would have X number of dollars for college. And then when he reached his senior year, he would get some more money. When he graduated, he'd get some more. And then when he was like 27 or 28, he would get the remainder. Why did I do that? Why did we do that? Why did Sarah and I do that? Because we didn't want him to have this large lump sum of money, and then he'd go out and buy a Corvette and wrap around a telephone pole. You know, I mean, you know, children are not always responsible for everything they do. So we wanted to incrementally give him what he needed based on what the guardian, the decision making on the guardian's part. Now, I ran into some challenges. We chose a family from our church, and my wife knew John. John was in her science class in high school. It wasn't like we didn't know these people. Renita had been to Bangladesh as a missionary. I mean, we thought these are really great people. They had 2 daughters of their own. And so about, I don't know, about 6 months into the process, John calls me and says, I need to have lunch with you. I said, okay. So we had lunch. And he says, I got a real problem here, Rick. I'm gonna be guardian of Brian, and I'm gonna have close to $500,000, and I'm really uncomfortable with that. And I said, well, explain, tell me more. What's the challenge? He says, well, that's your money. And I said, well, that's true, but we're not here. I mean, we're deceased. Okay, so you got to take care of Brian. And he said, well, what do I do? And I said, well, you're going to have to buy a van, because now you're going to have 3 kids to haul around. You're going to probably have to add on your house, because you're going to need an extra bathroom or a bedroom. I mean, there's going to be a lot of things. You're going to have to assess a fee for the time and effort that you're going to take to manage that $500,000. Oh, and you're okay with that? I said, yes. I mean, yeah, that's why we chose you and Renita. Okay, well, I feel better about that. That was a good thing. So you can see here that when you go through this process, you just can't name just anybody to be the guardian of your child. It's going to take some thoughtful discussions. Well, then we're about 10 years into the process, and I opened up the Kokomo Tribune, and I see where Renita filed for divorce. And I thought, oh no, I thought we knew these folks. What happened? So I called John up and I said, hey, we need to have lunch. I said, what's going on? He says, well, we're getting a divorce. I said, well, why didn't you call me? I'm sorry, I have to admit this, but I was really angry. I mean, what if we had died that day? They would have gotten $500,000 and who knows would have taken care of Brian. And I mean, it was really tough. So Sarah and I scrambled. We got a hold of an attorney. We changed our will. We found another family. And we asked them, would you be willing to raise Brian if something happened to us? And, I mean, we live in an imperfect world and the world is unfair. And I mean, all these problems happen, but we scrambled and over the next 5 days, we had to change our will. So what am I saying? What's the takeaway from this? You may think you really know somebody that's going to be the guardian of your child, but I don't think we really do. You really got to work at that one. And it's not going to be perfect. We live in an imperfect world. Things happen. You just got to be prepared for that. Have a backup plan. We didn't have any backup plan. So that one really blindsided us. I mean, now, thankfully, John apologized, asked forgiveness, and everything is good, but life happens. And I share that not to scare you away, but just to give you some precautionary boundaries here that you got to work through some of this and think through guardianship. And a will is really important. And it's the first step before you go into developing a trust or a special needs trust. Okay. Now, a special needs trust is just that. It's a special needs trust and very expensive to set up. And it's generally used for large expenses, not for the day-to-day living expenses of a disabled child. The ABLE accounts and the ABLE Now accounts are what are used for the day-to-day expenses of that child. So my opinion is that we need a will first. Get that in place in case something happens. Then you've got the bases covered for guardianship and executorship, power of attorney for finances, power of attorney for healthcare. And I think that then will bring you peace of mind because you have the insurance in place, you have the will in place, and our whole objective here is not to be filled with anxiety or fear or something that's going to destroy our family. Our objective is to deliver peace and a sense of satisfaction that I've done something that will care for that loved one that I have and that I care deeply about. Okay, now, any questions?
Nothing in the chat right now.
Okay.
Can you explain the difference between a special needs trust and a regular trust?
Yes. Okay. A regular trust, it could be similar to a special needs trust, but let's say the case of Brian. Brian, we could stipulate a lot of things in there, like the funds are only to be used for education, and the funds would be distributed only at set points if he reached and achieved certain objectives. So a special needs trust is generally for a special needs child. And it can be combined with the ABLE accounts or the ABLE Now accounts, where a traditional trust for a child, those are generally not used with the ABLE or the ABLE Now accounts. Does that help answer the question? Okay, good.
Do you want to ask if anybody would like to come off of mute and ask any questions?
Absolutely,
live?
absolutely, absolutely.
I don't know if they heard me.
Wow, we did great on time.
We did.
Whoa.
Does anybody have any questions where they'd like to come off of mute and just ask Rick directly outside of chat?
No, come on, I wasn't that good.
So Rick, I got a question for you. When you have
Dr. Capone, hold on a moment. We can't hear you.
oh, I'm off of mute. Not sure why.
I can hear you.
Recording in progress.
Let me go ahead and ask. And Rick, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Do you have are there any guidelines in general for sort of, I know this is a vague question, but I think parents have to face it. So if you have a special needs child, is there any sort of recommended amount per year that you put away for the child's age and their anticipated longevity? I know it's kind of a crazy way to ask it, but I think every parent has to face that.
Yes. Okay. On the ABLE accounts, the maximum you can contribute per year for 2023 is 17,000.
Oh,
So if a family was going to anticipate the day-to-day expenses for that child, then one of their goals or objectives would be to try to contribute $17,000 a year to an ABLE account.
and is that per person?
However, coming back to the life insurance, and we're trying to create something that is basically in the industry 27 cents on the dollar. So I am paying 27 cents for every $1 of value. So you can see where you can get multiples of that, and you could conceivably purchase a $500,000 contract that could, at some point in the future, create a bucket of funds of $500,000. Now, I'm just pulling out of thin air 500,000 because, again, I don't know the particulars of the family. I don't know the objectives. I don't know the history. I don't know. There's just so many unknowns. And that's where I sit around the kitchen table with families and we work through. There's no quick formula that I can put in front of somebody and say, okay, this works consistently for every single family, because every single child is different. Does that
Thank you.
answer the question?
It does.
Okay. I would say this. One of the quotes that I want everyone to remember and take away, and I think it will be valuable, and I think this sums up everything that I was trying to communicate this evening. The test of a good decision is a test of time. Time has a way of changing things. So our decision-making process here is that we want to make the most informed, intelligent, thoughtful, spiritual decision for our child that we can possibly make that will stand the test of time. Now, life isn't perfect and things happen. I understand that. There are economic crashes, there are bank crashes, bank failures, but I think I have laid out for you that if you choose a top-rated insurance carrier with the highest possible ratings and the right type of insurance product, you will not be disappointed.
You do have a question? So if Stephanie would like to come off mute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for all of this good information. I have a question specific to our family. We have an 8-year-old son who was born blind with Nori disease, and he is also autistic on the more severe end of the spectrum. He is developmentally delayed, and he will, for lack of a better way to say it, he'll never be independent. He'll never live alone. So my husband, Adam, and I are, doing everything we can to set him up, for his future and for his life ahead. So we do have an Able Now account for him. My husband and I each have a life insurance plan, which I think will probably maybe look at switching our plans based on the information that you gave tonight, because we each have a term life insurance plan. So I think I want to do some more research and maybe look into switching to one of the other plans that you recommended. He will also, so when I retired from active duty, I also elected for coverage for my husband and children through a survivor benefit plan. And so that's another type of coverage that Sean will be eligible for when I die. And what I have a question on specifically, because I don't really know much about Social Security. What Social Security benefit might he be eligible for down the line? I guess when he turns 18, Sean might be eligible to receive some sort of Social Security benefit. Is that correct?
Okay. I appreciate that question. I'm not sure that I can totally answer that because I don't have the Social Security information in front of me to say definitively in dollars and cents what your child would be entitled to. But I will answer your question this way. The Special Needs Trust, the ABLE accounts, will not disqualify somebody from receiving Medicaid and Social Security benefits. So they will not count against them. Okay, so that's a plus. All right. Now, maybe in the future, we could talk offline, call my office, and I could talk and get some details from you, and then I could do the research and call you back. But I really don't have an answer for you specifically what the dollar amount would be for your child. I will say also, and I'm not trying to bring attention to myself here, but there was a time when my dad and I sat down and we discussed this. And, you know, again, my ROP diagnosis is not as severe as many other people. Even though I don't see it on my right eye and my left eye turns out to the left, I have relatively good vision. But my dad and I discussed applying for disability from Social Security, and I made a decision not to apply for that. And because I felt like I wanted to go through life on my own. And I'm not saying that your child has to do that, and I'm not saying anybody else's child has to do that. That was a decision we made as a family, personally, my dad and I, my mother, and it was tough sledding many times. And you're seeing the results today of many, many, many years of hard work to achieve the things that I'm achieved in life. And so, but I'm not sure that I've totally answered your question, kind of skirted it.
Well, it wasn't so much, I'm not looking for like a specific, dollar amount, what might my child be eligible for. I think my question is more broad, like my son is already, he already has Medicaid coverage. He's on a Medicaid waiver and he qualifies for that, based on his disability and the fact that, Medicaid typically is, I guess, targeted for low income people. He qualifies because of his disability. And so for Social Security, I don't know that much about it, but in the back of my mind, I thought that there is some, like he doesn't qualify for any Social Security benefit now because he lives with us and our income is too high. He wouldn't qualify for anything. But when he turns 18 and he's legally an adult, he's not going to have any income. So I guess my question is just, and I could probably even Google it and find the answer. But my question is just for somebody who is disabled and, they don't have any income, I believe they do qualify for some level of benefit.
So what I would suggest is go to the Social Security website and or call your local Social Security office and ask that question. And they should be able to help you. You may be on hold for quite a while, but that would be the best place to start. I
Mhm.
mean, that's where I would start on your behalf. Once I chatted with you and got some more specifics, I'm gonna have to go to the Social Security Administration and find out.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we're at time.
Right? Okay.
All right. Rick, thank you
You're
so
welcome.
very much. We're at 7 o'clock, so we're gonna go ahead and end our webinar. Rick's information is up. It'll also be on the video that we'll share with everyone. And then we encourage you to stay involved with PRRF. So you can reach out at our website, which is just prrf.org, and connect with us on Facebook and LinkedIn. So thank you everyone for joining and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.